The night hung heavy with darkness as Ben trudged through the desolate streets of the small, forgotten town. The dim glow of the flickering streetlights cast eerie shadows on the deserted buildings, creating an unsettling atmosphere. Ben had always considered himself a rational man, dismissing tales of ghosts and supernatural occurrences as mere superstitions. Little did he know, this night would challenge his skepticism. As he walked past the ancient cemetery, a chill ran down his spine. Tombstones stood like silent sentinels, their names worn away by time. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, and Ben couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He quickened his pace, trying to convince himself it was just his imagination. Reaching his small, weather-worn house on the outskirts of town, Ben hesitated before unlocking the front door. The creaking hinges echoed through the silent night as he stepped into the dimly lit hallway. An unsettling silence enveloped him, broken only by the distant howl of the wind. Ben dismissed the unease, attributing it to the isolation of the town. As he settled into his usual routine, the oppressive silence intensified. The ticking of the old grandfather clock seemed louder than usual, each second echoing through the empty rooms. Ben decided to distract himself with mundane tasks, hoping to shake off the growing sense of dread that clung to him like a shadow. Hours passed, and fatigue finally began to weigh on Ben. He reluctantly prepared for bed, trying to shake off the nagging feeling that he was not alone. Crawling under the covers, he extinguished the bedside lamp, plunging the room into darkness. Just as he closed his eyes, a faint whisper echoed in the stillness. Ben. His eyes shot open, scanning the room for the source of the disembodied voice. Heart pounding, he dismissed it as a trick of his tired mind and closed his eyes again, determined to get some rest. Ben, don't ignore me. The voice was clearer this time, sending shivers down his spine. Ben sat up, straining to identify the origin. The room seemed to close in on him, the walls bearing witness to the unsettling presence that lingered. Unable to shake off the feeling of being watched, Ben cautiously stepped out of his bed. The floor creaked beneath his weight, and he could feel the tension in the air as he moved towards the hallway. The moonlight cast eerie shadows, distorting familiar objects into grotesque forms. "Who's there?" Ben's voice trembled, the silence that followed only amplifying his anxiety. He took hesitant steps down the corridor, the shadows playing tricks on his imagination. As he reached the living room, a cold gust of wind swept through, extinguishing the dim glow of the remaining candles. The room plunged into complete darkness, and Ben fumbled for his phone, using its feeble light to navigate through the unfamiliar surroundings. A soft whisper echoed through the room, seemingly carried by the wind that now seemed to howl with malevolence. "Ben, why did you leave me?" The voice was hauntingly familiar, a distant memory clawing its way to the surface of his consciousness. As he stumbled through the inky darkness, the oppressive presence seemed to intensify. Shadows danced on the walls, taking on sinister shapes that seemed to close in on him. Desperation fueled his search for the truth. Ben found himself standing in front of an old, dusty family portrait. The faces were worn, but the eyes held a haunting familiarity. His heart raced as he recognized the woman in the photograph, his long-lost sister, presumed dead for years. A cold realization gripped him. The voice, the shadows, the unrelenting gaze, it was all connected to the painful past he had tried to bury. As the whispers grew louder, he realized that he was not alone at night. The ghosts of his past had returned to claim him. Ben's breath caught in his throat as the room seemed to close in around him. The shadows contorted into ghastly shapes, resembling figures from the past. The air became thick with the weight of unresolved emotions and unspoken words. The whispers evolved into desperate pleas, echoing through the darkness. "Ben, why did you leave me alone?" Torn between fear and a surge of guilt, Ben struggled to find his voice. "Is it really you, Emily?" he asked, his words barely audible in the oppressive silence. The room seemed to respond with an anguished wail of wind, as if confirming the connection. Memories flooded back, revealing the tragic accident that had separated the siblings years ago. Emily's face, eternally young and full of life, haunted him. As Ben grappled with the unearthed pain, he realized he couldn't escape the torment of the past. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. He retraced his steps, following an invisible thread of memories, until he found himself standing before the long-forgotten entrance to the attic. With a trembling hand, Ben pulled down the dusty attic ladder. Each step seemed to creak under the weight of his trepidation. The cold air of the attic hit him, and he squinted into the darkness. In a corner, obscured by forgotten relics, he saw a small weathered box. He opened it, revealing old letters, photographs, and a locket that held a picture of him and Emily. The contents told a story of a family torn apart by tragedy and haunted by the unspoken. As Ben sifted through the artifacts of their shared past, the whispers grew quieter, replaced by a bittersweet sense of closure. The attic seemed to exhale a final sigh, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The shadows that had danced menacingly retreated, leaving Ben alone in the quiet space. The weight that had burdened his heart for years lifted, replaced by a profound sadness and acceptance. Descending from the attic, Ben felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. The whispers had ceased, and the night no longer seemed foreboding. As he looked at the old family portrait once more, he whispered a heartfelt goodbye to Emily, releasing her spirit from the confines of the past. The night was dark and silent, with only the faint glow of streetlights casting long shadows on the empty streets. Daniel, a weary traveler, found himself alone in a small, unfamiliar town. He had taken a wrong turn on the desolate highway, leading him to this eerie place with its deserted buildings and an unsettling stillness that hung in the air. As Daniel walked through the narrow streets, the silence seemed to amplify the sound of his own footsteps. The occasional creaking of an old sign swinging in the wind echoed like distant whispers. Unease settled in his stomach, but he dismissed it as mere paranoia. Attempting to find his way back to the main road, Daniel noticed a flickering light at the end of an alley. Intrigued, he cautiously approached and discovered a dimly lit bar, its sign barely visible through the darkness. The entrance door creaked open as he pushed it, and the air inside was thick with an unsettling quiet. The bartender, a grizzled man with tired eyes, nodded at Daniel without a word. The few patrons scattered throughout the dimly lit space stared at their drinks, lost in their own thoughts. Daniel ordered a drink, hoping for some human interaction to shake off the growing unease. As the night wore on, Daniel attempted small talk with the locals, but his questions were met with brief, cryptic answers. It became apparent that this town harbored secrets, and its residents were unwilling to share them. Growing more frustrated, Daniel decided to leave the bar and continue his journey. Back on the empty streets, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The shadows seemed to move, and distant whispers lingered in the air. He quickened his pace, desperate to escape the oppressive atmosphere that surrounded him. Turning a corner, he stumbled upon an abandoned playground. The rusty swings swayed in the wind, creating an eerie melody that sent shivers down his spine. Despite the unsettling scene, Daniel pressed on, determined to find his way out of this strange town. As he reached the outskirts, the silence intensified. The only sound was the distant howling of the wind through abandoned structures. Daniel's anxiety peaked, but he pressed on, guided only by the distant glow of the highway lights. The highway seemed like a distant mirage as Daniel walked, the darkness seemingly swallowing every step. The wind carried haunting echoes, as if the town itself was whispering ancient secrets. Unnerved, Daniel quickened his pace, desperate to escape the suffocating stillness. After what felt like an eternity, he stumbled upon an old gas station. The flickering fluorescent lights revealed a figure hunched over a map at the counter. Relieved, Daniel approached, hoping for directions. The figure turned slowly, revealing hollow eyes and a face etched with sorrow. "They never leave," the figure whispered, a voice laden with anguish. No one ever leaves this town." Daniel recoiled, his heart pounding in his chest. Before he could respond, the figure pointed towards a decaying bulletin board covered in faded missing persons posters. Each face seemed to tell a tale of those who had crossed paths with the enigmatic town and never returned. Fueled by a mixture of fear and determination, Daniel retraced his steps, determined to find an escape route. As he passed the playground again, he noticed a narrow alley that he had overlooked before. It led to a dilapidated mansion, its crumbling facade bathed in an otherworldly glow. Against his better judgment, Daniel entered the mansion, the floorboards groaning beneath his weight. Dust hung in the air like a spectral mist as he explored room after room. His search for an exit became a descent into the unknown, the mansion's corridors seemingly shifting and warping around him. In a dimly lit room, he discovered an old diary. Its pages revealed the town's dark history, a tale of a curse that had befallen it centuries ago. The curse trapped the souls of the residents, making them mere specters, bound to the town's desolate streets. Daniel shuddered as he read about their desperate attempts to break free, all ending in failure. Haunted by the chilling revelations, Daniel continued his quest to escape. The mansion seemed to conspire against him, leading him in circles, distorting reality. The whispers that had plagued him since his arrival grew louder, a chorus of sorrowful voices pleading for release. Finally, Daniel stumbled upon a decrepit staircase leading to the mansion's attic. There, he found an ancient relic, a pendant that, according to the diary, held the key to breaking the curse. A sense of urgency gripped him as he made his way back to the town center, the pendant clutched tightly in his hand. As he reached the heart of the town, a spectral figure appeared before him, the ghostly manifestation of a young woman, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and hope. The pendant began to glow, its ethereal light enveloping both of them. In that moment, the town's eerie silence shattered, replaced by a cacophony of whispers and wails. The curse was breaking, and the trapped souls found solace in their release. The spectral figures, once bound to the shadows, dissipated into the night. The town, no longer haunted by the weight of its tragic history, seemed to come alive. Streetlights flickered on, and a gentle breeze carried away the lingering darkness. As dawn approached, Daniel found himself standing at the town's entrance, the pendant now cold and lifeless in his hand. With the first light of dawn, he stepped onto the highway, leaving the once enchanted town behind. As he looked back one last time, the town appeared normal, devoid of the haunting secrets that had unfolded during that fateful night.